So I will first give a bit more elaboration on the ideal versus real, and then we go deeper into the results of the survey, and we will elaborate more on this discussion. And I would like to take you more in-depth or deeper into the historic urban landscape approach, and how that model and how that approach defines our Garden of Eva, if you would, Adam of Eva, if you would like to say, because what it's actually doing is that it is stretching all possible barriers we had in the past in relationship, backwards, sorry. So you go beyond the traditional concepts of heritage, and you take the city as a whole, like the city aging, just like a human being, an ecosystem. And a wider context, values, and you see them growing, and they are very varied, and they change over time. So we have all sorts of dimensions, attributes, no longer specific heritage categories, but it can be now natural, cultural, movable, immovable, digital, analog, you name it. If we create new categories to classify and study them, it's all possible, because what it really matters is what the city is later on going to define as valuable to them and what they want to take forward for following generations. But of course, each city is in its own environment. They have all sorts of technicalities and contexts, which already the convention is highlighting and putting up the bigger picture, which are going to make an influence to the development. Of course, geographical setting. And you have the whole process and the heritage management, which is diversity and identity led forward. So if you show this to someone which is working on heritage management, maybe they say, oh, wow, that's too complex. I don't even want to start on it. You know, what the hell? This is really the ideal. You know, everything is possible, and they have on their hands the decision to choose whatever is their heritage and who is going to be involved on the processes, who are the stakeholders and the values they share and they take forward. And it's very different from a few years ago when we were telling on recommendations, you should all go and preserve religious heritage or military remains and Roman Empire. You know, it was clear and specific. That's it. That's what heritage. If you don't protect that, then you're doing it wrong on your city. You're a failure. And now we're telling you can choose. So, and things change over time. So be flexible. And this might be for some people too ideal and might bring a lot of discussion into the table and complexity. But we find it very interesting and we work on it. So, of course, there are some guidelines and some ideas, okay, how can you work it through? And you have seen this in several publications. This is not an official step-by-step approach. This is an approach as a recommendation which got lost on the drafts of the recommendation. So it was never adopted officially as the whole approach recommendation, step-by-step. But we really like to use it as a theoretical background to really try to understand. And if you compare this to ecosystem services and the whole values-based approach, landscape-based approach, this is very similar. And what it actually means is bringing up all that mind map into a process and says, okay, have a look at your city. What are the resources you have? Let's reach consensus. What do we value, and why? So the attributes and values, what and why, and then assess how vulnerable they are and how far are they being changed over time and how development is affecting it. Then to check policies and how far are they flexible and addressing all these matters and protecting what should be protecting. And in a way, because not always you can do everything, also in your own family, in your own home, you have to prioritize what you're going to do first. So you need to prioritize, and the reasons why you prioritize and the criteria you use it's dependent on the city itself. And then based on the actions, and some are long-term, some are short-term, they all involve different partners. And that can be community, cross public, private. That can be sometimes only public, sometimes only private. And that's what it makes so interesting, is that diverts the assumption that always the local government or the national government should take care of their heritage, and give it more accountability to, okay, if there are all actions we need to do, who should be involved, and how are we exactly going to do it? So, and this has been a bit of a base of what we have been working with different cities all over the world. Put this as a background and check exactly what has been done already and what would they like to do next. And what we also like to always share and put a big emphasis is that there are no right and wrong approaches. One approach and one method can work for a certain city in a certain time and cannot be so efficient anymore in few years to come due to other pressures and other externalities. So keep being flexible and not fire the technician who had the idea to implement a certain method and to crucify, as we see sometimes in academia, and even in policy reports, that then all of a sudden everyone becomes very emotional about when something doesn't work, but it might work in the other cities. So my recommendation is always keep trying until it really works for your city, and don't even take as granted that in 10 years it's still going to work. So keep the pace and keep checking what is happening. I go a bit further because I also like to talk too much and I don't have the alarm here. Tools, of course, the ideal tools, but I always also challenge that modern tools are often also interdisciplinary, and here you see a bit the tools by silos and by disciplines. So, for example, crowdfunding, you have at the same time civic engagement and you have financial tools integrated in ICT. So there are modern tools which are bringing up all these different disciplines and aspects together. And then a bit of a teaser, because for those who are very romantic about participatory practices and community engagement, like I am, then the moment we are doing them, and I'm not, I don't have psychology as background. I graduated as an architect, so by principle I got no training on dealing with people, rather than saying, or at least there was the assumption, I'm God and you should leave wherever I design. You should leave and not complain and not change anything. So that's a bit the assumption on our training, which I didn't agree upon. But that's something which is changing as well with co-design practices and all these sorts of new approaches. But just to show that there's, even when you're well intended, it still stays a challenge. And now I go a bit more from the ideal and the whole conceptual background of our work, which we try to connect, and just gave a quick background to who doesn't know our research team and our projects, that we are constantly jumping from the global level where we do global assessments and global analysis, and then we go deeper with the master students and with the PhD students with case studies. So we go up and down, and we accept that if you go up, you are more abstract, and maybe some information is not that reliable anymore, that you have a lot of interpretation and I'd say generalization, but still is interesting to place a certain case study in context and how it relates to the different regions, how it relates to the different countries. So we keep using this methodology and approach where we interlink global and local. And that's also the work a bit of Ilaria, that now she did a survey at global level and later on, but she will focus on local level, but she will tell you more about it later. So we had many cities over the years, more than 20. We worked with local governments, national governments, local universities, wherever we can, because we really try to understand exactly how cities evolve over time and the role of heritage in it. And I'll show you just a few examples where we did specific projects engaging with communities and where communities had an active role. Just for a kind of overview, that we try different methodologies and methods depending on the city and what the partners are more interested in. And then, of course, we learn a lot from them. And this was a workshop of 5 days where you see with different methods and settings, where first you have traditional presentations, then you are hand in hand, almost walking in the street and discussing all the problems and really facing the specific problems and debating them on site. And there going through the 6 steps and really trying to understand what they have already, what are they missing, and what should they do as a follow-up. So, and even if it's very intensive, I can tell you in particular later on more about these projects, but just to show you here, all sorts of representatives of stakeholders were there, from the international to the local level, from minority communities to major communities. So this was quite a broad scope workshop. Later on, I'll show you different. As a follow-up from these workshops, we had a deep, in-depth study where we did also, again, a multi-method approach, when we focus on the building, but also on the owners, because we wanted to understand how the ownership, private, public transition was taking place. But we also focus on the past in order to be able to do evolutions over time. Then another situation when we explore interlinking 5. And then Ilaria also needs time. So I'm going further. So this is more using ECT, interlinking intangible and tangible. Then here we are doing walking interviews. So we are interlinking with geography and posting pictures and people giving their feedback on how angry or how happy they are about certain developments of the city. We also engage with children and making drawings. So really try every time to find ways to get communities more involved. I'll skip this one, but this was a workshop integrating urban planning and heritage. And so it was within the disciplinary approach and trying to understand their perception on how the different stakeholders were involved in the process. And you see decision-making is really for this side only. So this is just a summary, and you can see it later on, so I'll just move forward so that Ilaria has time. And the challenges, we can discuss them later on. So I'll just move forward to Ilaria.
Thank you. I know I don't have that much time, but I still want to, I still want to say that I'm very happy that I have the chance to work on this report, on this survey. And for this, I want to thank Anna and Jae-hoon. And also, I'm very happy that I have the chance to be here today to discuss about it with all of you. So, just to jump directly on it, the survey, it doesn't stand on its own, but it's part of a broader project designed in 2 phases. So, the first phase, it is based on this global online surveys that has been made available on the Congress website for everyone who wanted to register to be filled in. So mainly the respondents were public, so mayors and public officers, and but also we're working on video documentaries of the outcomes with Ivan there, very short videos where we will be able to reach out to a broader public and present our results so that everyone will be able to share it, for instance, on social media and, spread awareness about the community engagement practices around the world. And the second phase is where, as Anna was saying before, where we will move from the global general analysis to when we will dive into the local realities, and we will work with master students who are going to take part to the graduation studio. So the idea is we're going to send the students for 3 months to work in the field, and that they're going to undertake other local surveys supported by interviews, so to have a more direct contact, use a different jargon, so to have more reliable data also on the real perception of local communities about community engagement practices. Then with all this data that they will collect, they're going to organize activities like workshops, focus groups, and with all the material that they're going to take out of these activities, they're going to co-design solutions tailor-made for the reality where they've been working on. So it could be a contribution to local policies or for heritage management plans and so on. Then here is the website. I just click on it. I hope that you all already saw it. And so some facts and numbers about the survey. There are 20 questions, so it's a pretty long one, but this is my first one. So it was made available in the 3 official languages, so English, French, Spanish, plus 8 extra languages. It was open to the public on the 1st of June, and we're going to close it at the end of November. Okay. And, well, the Tabri Lottery, so give us about it. So for, until now, we had 197 responses, and 78 of these 197s were complete. So we have a 40% rate of, I think it's a big data. Yes, and so from more than 40 countries, from all the regional secretariats and sectors. Well, since the questions are so many, I'm not going to go through them also because I have 3 minutes. But I clustered them into sub-teams, so participatory practice and community engagement, where I analyze stakeholders and level of governments, and steps and role Anna already explained to you. And community engagement about their perception and regulations and strengths and opportunities. So I make these 2 distinctions because I think it's important to contextualize the community engagement practices, because we are all talking about community engagement right now, but they are part of a broader reality, so participatory practices, because there are also public stakeholders who participate to heritage management somehow. So today I would like to discuss with you participatory practices, and tomorrow with the mayor's community engagement. I think it will give more interesting insights. So the focus for today is who takes part in heritage management in World Heritage Cities, and what role do these stakeholders have when they participate in the different stages, all steps of the managerial process. So who participate, you can see the warm colors are for public stakeholders, and cold ones for private. And we were surprised to see how all of them are actually represented, and there's quite a balance between the 2 different kind of stakeholders. But also another thing that we can notice is that there's not only these 2 divisions, but a division in 3 different other groups. So you can see the communities on the left side, so the least represented, and they are the daily users like owners, renters, and workers, and the occasional users like tourists, citizens, customers. And on the left side, you have politicians, yes, politicians and policymakers. Well, but it's interesting to see that doesn't matter if they're public or private, still those who participate the most are professionals. So the experts, either they are public officers or private professionals and consultants, but experts are still those who participate the most. This is actually the most important graph I wanted to discuss with you. I'm trying to go very fast through it. You can see every line, every color represents a stakeholders, and on the bottom line, you can see the different steps. So mapping resources, the whole steps that Hannah has already explained to you. And here on the left, we kind of we were analyzing whether the stakeholders are very passive, so not informed, consultant, enrolled, or they're part of the decision-making process through all the steps. So what I wanted to say about this data is that, we were expecting, there's a general trend, let's say. I'm going to skip. Yeah, there's a general trend. So all the stakeholders keep generally the same level of participation throughout the whole steps, except for the last ones in the build partnership. Well, we were expecting more variety, especially after all the presentation of the case studies and intervention during the Congress. Yes, and also concerning the last step, this is maybe can raise some awareness on where the weaknesses in the process are, and maybe we can focus the discussion on that, and think of some possible new strategies to implement the practices. Because of this discrepancy, so this lack of variety, we concluded, we thought that since these data don't represent the actual practices, but the perception that the stakeholders have of these practices, yes, let's go to the summary. Then. Yes. So as we said, we already talked about the difference in so the balance between private and public participants, and the difference between communities, governments, and experts, and the decrease over steps of participations for all the stakeholders and the politicians. I don't know. Well, I just go quickly for you to notice that another interesting data is that the politician seems to be very active throughout the whole process. And, this is suspicious, data. Could be. So we were thinking that it would be interesting to talk more about it, but it goes back to the, to the each perception between real, ideal and real perception of what's going on, but also we have to take in consideration that the majority of the respondents of the surveys were actually public stakeholders. So we're thinking this is just a preliminary analysis of few data, but we will have to dig in depth in each single survey, most probably, and counter-check, cross-analyze this perception and the nature of the stakeholders in order to spot maybe some biases. Yes, and I have much more to say about it. I can also talk about it for days, so we can continue the discussion, but thank you for your attention.
In other words, one of the things which I always believe in is that it is the contractors, the big developers are interested. They've got the time and the money to be able to drag out times, but public participation needs to be in short, sharp shocks, where we know, in fact, we can then rally everybody and have a potential success. It's a work in progress, this, so anything which we say and the discussion afterwards will be of great interest to all of us, but let's sort of see some
Can you put it back?
Yeah, this is a pretty general classification actually, because it can be different from country to country.
Microphone.
We needed to take in consideration that this was a global survey, so we kind of counter-checked with colleagues from different countries. We tried to be more specific, but when we realized to be very European-centered, and our approach was
the two difference, and they had definitions there and translations, was that the policymakers are the one drafting the management plans and creating the laws, while the public officers are the ones applying them and implementing them, and making sure that projects are taking place following the. Yes, we define them. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure there are lots of other subgroups, like politicians in the coalition and those in the opposition.
Exactly.
Any other questions for Ega? That's right. If you didn't have a question, I'd be very
But I told she had to have 10 questions.
I'm sorry, maybe it's my lack of concentration. I missed something. Like, this is the result of the global survey, and this who participates question is answered by the survey respondents, and you're giving us the answers to that question.
Yes.
So this is their perception of participants.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Yeah. That's why it's their real perception, because that's they're answering about how they think the process is taking place.
Okay, how they perceive to be the
how
reality.
They perceive, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you, that was all.
Hello. Thank you. Sorry, my question is that, it's a question. I'm rephrasing it now from a commenter question. But, with the participation, the categories you got, I could be wrong, but I get the perception that you're seeing it as a constant. In reality, it's not a constant. I mean, these participants are not constant. Yeah. And there's a whole dynamic that keeps changing, the participation processes. So how are you going to sort of tease that out?
Yeah, like as I said, this is just such a preliminary analysis. Well, while we were doing it, we realized that, for instance, we have to go back to each single survey and analyze not only the questions that have been picked, but also those that have been excluded. And we have to analyze the context. So from which country? So I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the first question was that they would select the stakeholders which are participating in majority as a bigger picture, and then they got all sets of 10 questions only for those participants. So what you see already here is a chart on how often they were chosen by the participants to have been identified as main stakeholders in the process. What Ilaria is saying is that when she's going to analyze one by one and say the ones which were excluded and the ones which are, we are hoping to find patterns on those choices and maybe typologies in which public is majority, private is majority, and these type of things. But now we just are taking the bigger picture, and you can see already with the 76 complete how often the participants chose them as main stakeholders.
Any other questions? Yes.
Can you go to the next?
The next one.
Slide?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Oh no.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious because I kind of doubt that the many cities who follow these scales of the whole. Would you have that sense for whether they follow these whole 6 steps, or they kind of just randomly jumping from 6 to 1, or maybe skip most of those, or is that?
What I would say is that we decided to use this framework. Indeed, as Anna also said before, when you make this research on a global scale, you have to be general. And you have to look at a broader picture, even if you might have not less reliable data, but less exact on, yeah.
It is fine, but then my question is just that you have a sense of people would have somewhere where they indicated, okay, they do actually follow this.
Yes.
Sorry, I mean, I should have looked.
Yeah. No, but I can answer to you that in particular, because we have been, this is not the first time we apply the 6 steps. We have been applying them since 2011. They do apply all the steps. What it happens and what it differs in every state, they don't realize they apply these steps, because often it's not the same persons and the same groups of stakeholders going through the whole process, and the process is not defined. What it also happens is that they don't apply the steps on the same order. So if there is a natural disaster, immediately assessment of vulnerability comes first. And then everything in terms of priorities shifts. So even the same city, they do these steps. They all recognize on the different workshops. We do those steps and we have different things. Of course, we have gaps. Most of it was lack of communication, lack of information transfer through the steps, and also that this process and these steps shift over time depending on the priorities of the mayor, depending on the projects going on, funding, natural disasters, etc. So the steps are there, how they are ordered, and what is in them, that's the variable, yeah.